I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard Macbeth, author of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard. Hope Santa was generous.
Yeah, it was a great Christmas, and looking out here at the minus 25 weather, but it's a beautiful white Christmas, so that makes up for it, I guess.
Well, Vancouver is snowing in -1, but it certainly isn't minus 25. Or as my little sister in Peace River pointed out, they're looking at the minus 40s now.
Oh.
And that translates in both Fahrenheit and Celsius, if you want to know how cold that is.
Yes.
And we're just wondering, has the cyber currency market cooled off since the big crash on Friday, or have they picked up again?
I think it's recovered a bit since, I didn't check it this morning yet, but yesterday it recovered a little bit from 15 up to 16 or something like that. So I was at several gatherings over Christmas, and some people asked about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and some people asked about marijuana stocks. So I had to search really quickly to come up with some good answers, because nobody really knows what is behind Bitcoin, and there's a lot of uncertainty about marijuana stocks as well. So it was, but that's what people are interested in, apparently.
Well, I was told that marijuana stocks were the business story of the year for Canada.
So I checked on a couple of them. There's one based in Edmonton and one based in Ontario. Canopy is in Ontario and Aurora is in Edmonton. And they're $3 and $4 billion market caps in the two of them. So that means they're going to have to sell a lot of marijuana at a profitable rate in order to justify those market valuations. And it's interesting because it's not ever going to be something like you're going to order a glass of wine when you're in a nice fancy restaurant and pay, I don't know what you pay for a glass of wine, $10 or a bottle of $50. I just can't visualize how that's going to translate into marijuana. And so the sales, distribution, marketing, taxation, all of that stuff is really kind of murky. I know next July 1st it's going to be legal, and that's, I guess, why the stock market valuations are up that high. But
well, apparently Trudeau told a Quebec radio station it won't be July 1st, probably because he doesn't want it known as Cannabis Day. But he said it will be legal sometime in the summer. And when you said it's not like a bottle of wine, in California, they're being super creative, and they're talking about selling marijuana-infused beer, marijuana-infused tacos. If you can eat it, they want to put marijuana in it.
Well, that might be the way to get it onto the broader distribution, because, and then, on the medical side, I was talking to a doctor that's a friend of mine, and he said that there isn't really any proof of any disease that marijuana. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of people out there that if they hear this, they're going to go, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" But there haven't been any definitive studies done that it actually has been approved to treat anything other than addiction to marijuana. So and it definitely treats that. So
there was a study out of UCLA that showed marijuana sloughed off lung cancer cells.
Yeah,
and so it didn't cause lung cancer; it stopped it from happening. And the Israelis have been using medical marijuana now for 25, 30 years. They have extensive research on what it works on too. A lot of the cases is, if you go and research the research, you will find the documents. But because North American society hasn't accepted marijuana until recently, and then in just small jurisdictions. They haven't publicized this research, so nobody's bothered to look for it.
Yeah, and the FDA is the FDA standards are pretty high since thalidomide and way back in the 1950s. So,
well, the reason we found out about the UCLA study was the World Health Organization sued the U.S. government to release reports or studies that found that marijuana had positive uses. And it turns out for 30 years, the U.S. government suppressed anything that made marijuana look good.
Yeah.
And they had to release that information. So that's one of the reasons why there isn't a lot of positive information about cannabis, is because the U.S. government wouldn't allow it to be made public.
One of the people that I met at one of the parties said that it reduces anxiety and in low doses. And so maybe there is. And also that same person said that Parkinson's patients find relief with marijuana as well. So and so there's a whole bunch of aspects of it, but there hasn't been an application, as far as I know, to the FDA to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies to get it approved, and that would be what it would take in order to. So in the meantime, it's going to be more recreational use that's going to be the thing. And
well, I believe in Vancouver there could be more marijuana dispensaries than there are Starbucks. I may be mistaken, but the number is quite high. Even though they brought in new rules and regulations saying they couldn't be within a certain distance of a school and so on, there's still loads of them everywhere. And also on the side of how much money the government can expect to raise, well, Statistics Canada just put out a news release saying they estimate in 2016 $6.2 billion worth of pot was sold in Canada. That's quite a bit of money.
And they can tax that.
Well, exactly. Not only just tax it, if they grow it themselves, they get the whole profit. And if it's Jody Emery, her and her husband, the Prince of Pot, Mark Emery, Jody said to me, I don't understand why marijuana prices will be so high. It doesn't cost any more to grow a pot plant than it does a cabbage, which in the wintertime will cost you $8 in the grocery store.
Wow.
So that's one of the reasons why. Why do they expect the prices to be so high? The government's other conundrum, how much do we charge for it and not have, because it doesn't cost a lot to grow, have the black market just come in and say, well, we can give it to you a whole lot less.
Well, that's the problem. It's like home brewing and all the different illegal things that people did in alcohol. People have their moonshine and all that, and I'm sure in some parts of North America they still have it. So, and that's designed to get around the government rules and taxation and all that. So, for sure that'll continue. Probably be headquartered in Nelson, BC, or something like that.
Probably. We'll have more with Hilliard Macbeth right after the break.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE symbol CRL and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Hilliard Macbeth. Hilliard, the big controversy in B.C., the NDP government giving reluctant approval to the continuation of the giant Site C hydro dam project in northeastern British Columbia in the Peace District. Are we going to need the power generated by that thing, or is this thing going to turn out to be just a giant white elephant all the way along its life?
We won't know for a while, but it certainly has some question marks over it from the point of view of the total North American grid. So the North American grid, as you know, is integrated between California and BC, and in the eastern coast it's between Quebec and New York and New Jersey. And one of the things that happened in the last few years, there were a couple of major storms. There was one in Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and then there was a more recent one in 2012 in New Jersey called Sandy. And they learned that if something hit in Manhattan, which is what happened with the storm surge and all that, people in Canada lost power. 175,000 homes lost power because the storm hit in New Jersey. So, so the culprit in all of that, one of the culprits is the fact that the grid, was designed in the 1930s and has not been really upgraded. So you've got this huge machine, basically the biggest machine in the world, all interconnected with each other, but based on very, very old technology. So if one part of it goes down, huge sections of it go down, and that's very, very dangerous and inefficient. So what the latest new ideas in terms of electrical distribution and transmission and supply is to have the smaller, they call them nanogrids or microgrids or distributed grids, where with wind and solar and natural gas and cogeneration, the production is very close to the user. So you'd have the ultimate would be a home with solar panels that would just produce enough power for itself, and then use the grid as backup. Industry would use a cogeneration plant and use the grid as backup. And so what one author, I've just finished reading a book called The Grid by Gretchen Bakke, and she seems to feel that eventually the grid will be relegated to more of a backup role than the primary production role as people roll out all these other ideas. And that means that a big plant like Site C, a hydroelectric plant like that, is a very expensive way of providing backup, especially when it's so far away from where the backup is needed. If it was a lot closer to California, for example, it could be argued it would make sense. But given its location, the amount of transmission involved, it seems like it's a real gamble. Because if they do produce, at certain times in some parts of North America and in Germany, pretty much all over Germany, now the wind turbines alone can supply up to 50% of the demand on the grid, and they actually have to pay people to take the electricity away because it has to be used, can't be stored, and if that were to happen in California and other parts of North America, Western North America, then the Site C, and hydroelectric is kind of hard to turn off and on instantaneously, would become a very, very poor form of expensive backup power.
Well, at some points of the day in California, solar's providing 50% of their power.
Yeah, like at the middle of the day, and all they have to do really is to figure out a way to store that power for a few hours. So the peak demand is from 5 o'clock when everybody gets home till about 10 o'clock when people generally are heading off to bed. And within that, the super peak is probably from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. when everything's turned on, the TV, the stove, the fridge, everything's going. And so all they need to do is take that solar, but unfortunately solar starts to run out around 4 or 5 p.m. depending on the time of the year. So,
well, the system I've seen that gives you storage is you heat sand during the day, like run it through the middle of an hourglass-like contraption, and then you store that sand during the evening and run water pipes through it. That sand can be as hot as 250, 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and that would easily convert the water running through the pipes into steam, which would run turbines, which would make your electricity.
Exactly. That is one of the big things that she discusses in this book, and what they're doing. Like for a home, it doesn't really make sense. Like it's just a battery would make, like a car battery or one of those solar power walls that Tesla's selling would work for a home. But for bigger applications, what they do is they have these concentrated mirrors that concentrate the solar energy into one spot where a bunch of sand is, and a huge installation of sand, and they do exactly what you just said. And the sand will store the heat I think the time frame was about 24 hours, so they could store it without too much trouble. So that would be a very easy way to shift the power, because they're really only talking about a few hours. And the other thing that is talked about is, and now this would require a change, but if a significant number of people had electric cars with large batteries, like electric cars have, those cars, if people get home at 5 o'clock and plug the car in, instead of using grid power, they could use the car power for the next 2 or 3 hours, and then have that replenished starting at midnight. And by the next morning, the car would be fully charged up again. So they could also use the car battery if it's plugged in at work. Say somebody's car is at work, they could during the middle of the day they could stuff energy into the car batteries. And that isn't there's nothing particularly breakthrough technology that's required to make that work. It just would require that the cars be plugged into a smart outlet at all times, whether at work or at home, and that enough people would have cars. It doesn't really work if only a few people have cars. But if enough people have cars with those batteries, then it would work. So, and all of those things are happening very quickly. That's one of the things that, and this book was published in 2016, and I've been following this pretty closely, and already some aspects of it are out of date. So it's things are moving very rapidly. And
well, you could personally tell us about what it's like to have an electric car. People have range anxiety about it, or they don't think it's going to perform very well. How does your electric car work?
It's fantastic, and the two things that people bring up are those is the range anxiety is number one, and then the second one is at least in Alberta they talk about cold weather operation in the winter, and it does use more energy in the winter. About the manual says 25%. If you turn absolutely everything on, it could be more than 25%. I had the heated seats, the heated steering wheel, and the heater going, because it was minus 29 last night. So, but the thing is, most of the time you're not going that far, right? And when you the range on mine is 500 kilometers, so there's absolutely no way I'd ever use that much in a full day, even with everything turned on. I might use 100 kilometers in a day driving around. So the only time it becomes an issue is when you're on the highway and you have to stop. But they have these superchargers, which are very fast chargers, placed strategically all the way from Edmonton to Vancouver. I've been from Edmonton to Vancouver twice and haven't run into any issues. So I think the big problem with electric cars are the cost, because right now the cost is very high and not very feasible for very many people, and that might be fixed if the new Tesla comes out, the Tesla 3 at $35,000, and then of course the availability of the chargers. But eventually, all of that I think will come, and because on the other hand, once people find out how nice it is never to have to stop at the gas station, and how most of the charging is done at night at home, so you don't really even notice any inconvenience there. And there's almost no maintenance, so you don't have to go and get your oil changed, and the transmission doesn't need fluid, and all these things that you just get so used to over so many decades of internal combustion engines. Most of that stuff is just gone.
So basically, all your Tesla needs is washer fluid and new tires now and then.
Yeah, and one of the biggest issues is it's a minor thing, but it actually turns out to be pretty important, is the tire pressure. So because it's quite a heavy car, you have to keep the tire pressure up to it's 40 psi, and it doesn't. So or it's about 3.1 millibars. And there's a little screen that comes up on the there's a big computer screen in the car, and it tells you, your one tire is down to 2.6 millibars, so you got to bring it back up again. So you have to figure out where you can get. because the pressure is so high, it does tend to need to be checked more often. But the higher you put it, the better the car performs in terms of mileage. Or
yes,
range, I guess.
high tire pressure does make your car more efficient.
Yeah, it just makes it a little bit more efficient. So, but the fun thing about it is the acceleration, and I splurged for the super fast acceleration. But even just the regular model, the much cheaper model, is still super fast acceleration. So once people get used to experience that and get to like it and enjoy it, and maybe not everybody's going to like it, but I think most people will. It will get word will get around, I suspect, because they haven't done any advertising yet. They haven't done a single dollar of advertising yet. So I think mostly because they can't keep up with production of the orders they've already got. But eventually, there will be when they get a product that most people would be willing to buy, which has started. I think it's going to start in January when the 3 is more widely available. You'll see a lot more awareness of it, and I think those things like range anxiety and cold weather operation, those issues will fade away pretty quickly.
How does the Tesla handle in snowy weather?
Well, it's great. There's 2 electric motors, one in the front axle, one in the rear axle. So there's all-wheel drive, and it's as good as anything that you can imagine. It's a very heavy car, so it might. I haven't experienced this, but I suppose because it's so heavy, but it seems very stuck to the road compared to a lighter car. So there aren't any issues there. There just aren't very many issues unless you really hate stopping. If you wanted to drive for 5 hours straight, it would be hard to do. You'd have to stop after about 3 or 4 hours, but most of us have to stop sooner than that anyway for a bathroom break, and then if you time it, you get a little electric charge, a 20-minute charge up, and then you're on your way again. So it's I think people would get used to that pretty quickly.
We'll have more with Hilliard Macbeth right after this.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're chatting with Hilliard Macbeth. Hilliard, did we see any panic buying in the real estate market with the new mortgage rules coming into effect on January 1st?
I think that was maybe a more of a thing that was talked about. The lenders actually were told by the regulator in October, when the new rules came out, that the regulator would like the lenders to start applying that test right away. But officially it comes into effect on January the 1st, 2018. So already the lenders would have been adjusting their attitude. But if somebody desperately, somebody had a buyer that was all lined up and they couldn't qualify under the new rules, but they did qualify under the old rules, the lender has the ability to waive the requirement, or had the ability to waive the requirement in November and December. I don't know how much of that happened. I mean, it seems crazy to me that somebody would want to so desperately buy something, because the other thing that's more likely to happen is the price will come down, because depending on which report you read or who you believe, it could be as many as 10 or even 20% of all buyers in a certain price range are now no longer going to be able to qualify for the financing, and that means that people misinterpret that. I think they think, well, that means the house prices are going to be unreachable, but that isn't the way it actually works. houses are worth what the financing will stretch to. So if the financing only stretches to $400,000 instead of $500,000, and there are always some sellers that have to sell or are desperate to sell, then prices will come down from 500 to 400. It's always worked that way, and I'm sure in this case it will work that way again. So unless the lenders find another loophole, but I think the loopholes are one after another. They've been closed, and it's not that the regulators are very, very smart about this. They have tended in the past to leave it up to the banks and the other lenders to kind of sort it out themselves. But since Home Capital came out in last May, the regulators' attitudes have changed. What happened with Home Capital, as we talked about before, is there was fraud undiscovered, and then the Home Capital almost went under and had to be rescued first by a pension plan, then by Warren Buffett. And it scared everybody, including the regulators. So now they're looking at this thing much more closely and saying, okay, can these people really afford these mortgages? And, how much of a down payment is the right down payment? And so all of that means that there'll be less financing available. And then the lenders themselves might sort of take a different attitude and say, instead of trying to issue as many mortgages as possible without any regard to whether these people can pay back the mortgages, they're going to start being a little bit more careful as to who they lend money to. And I think they've been put on notice by CMHC and by OSFI, the regulator, that there's going to be a tougher attitude. And so once they start doing that, which is, that's the way the system works in Germany, for example, then that'll be enough to change it by itself. So whether there was panic buying or not, there isn't a lot of evidence that there was, but there might have been some. In January, I think we're going to face a new regime. One of the things that the banks were doing is they were lending money to anybody who could fog a mirror as long as they had a 20% down payment. And so as of January 1st, that's over. Now the person, even though if they have a 25% down payment, will be required to meet all of the tests as to whether they can afford to repay that mortgage. And that's going to be tough. And the other thing, of course, is the CMHC insurance, where the banks would create that situation with a 25% down payment, a big mortgage, and this will affect the more expensive houses. And then they would go out and buy the insurance from CMHC themselves. The lender would buy the insurance. Normally it's the home buyer that buys the insurance, but in this case, there was this other option called portfolio insurance, where the lender would buy the insurance as a way of protecting themselves. I don't know if they thought, well, gee, maybe that guy borrowed that whole 25% down payment, and either that or they just wanted to bundle it in with all the other insured mortgages. But in any case, that isn't available anymore. So that those two factors, plus the crackdown by CRA on taxes on house flipping, there's a multitude of factors that almost for sure will mean that we'll face a very different environment in 2018 for house buying and house financing and house flipping and all that stuff.
Does that mean we'll return to a so-called normal market?
It's been so long since we had a normal market. I don't think anybody's going to recognize it. Unfortunately, my thesis would be, as I wrote in the book, would be that we're going to have to go through an abnormal market of the other kind first before we get back to normal. So we go abnormally hot, and then we go abnormally cold, and then eventually we get back to normal. So a normal market would be several years away, because we have to go through the unwinding of the great bubble, not just the house price bubble, but the debt bubble first before we can get back to normal. And one of the things that I saw a couple of days ago in the Globe and Mail was a story about a single mother who had two teenage children, and this is an amazing story, I think. And she bought houses for both of these kids, $400,000 each, roughly, And she was mortgage-free until she decided that she wanted to do this. She put 20% down on each of the houses. And of course, she would have had to sign for the mortgage because both the children were under 18. And she did it because she felt that if they didn't get in now, they'd never be able to get in. Now, she did this a couple of years ago. I don't even think under the new rules she would be able to do this, but there was quite a debate on Twitter about whether this was a good idea or not. And the person they interviewed in the Globe Mail article, Sue Latrimoy, who works in Toronto as a financial advisor, said it was a crazy idea. And she had some really good arguments as to why. And I chimed in on Twitter, but I got quite a bit of pushback. People said, "Well, why not? Why not? She made money, so what's wrong with that?" So anyway, that was my lesson over at Christmas. There are a lot of people out there that believe that you should go out and buy houses for your 12-year-old kids, which seems crazy to me.
Hilliard, I know a lot of things seem crazy to us, but then things that we thought were crazy in the past turned out to be good things. So don't judge anything by what we think is crazy or not.
I got to change with the times, right?
Exactly. Hilliard, thank you so much for chatting with us, and we'll talk to you next year.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jim.
My guest has been Hilliard Macbeth, author of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. His website, macbethgroup.com. You're listening to HoweStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Oh, by the way, our Twitter handle has changed to @HoweStreet. Questions for the show can be emailed to info@HoweStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Happy holidays.
Comments made on HoweStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HoweStreet.com radio is a production of HoweStreet Media Incorporated.